the book that I published last year was Hotel Scarface, where cocaine cowboys partied and plotted to control Miami. I was raised in Miami, and let me tell you, doing a book on cocaine in the heyday of Miami and Miami Vice and Scarface and all the crazy things that went down in the late 70s and early 80s, naturally, in the course of your investigative reportage, these former dopers and DEA people and hitmen and women of the night turn around and it's like, wait a minute, why am I telling you all this? How old were you? What's up? What do you know about cocaine? Well, I'm going to tell you what I know about cocaine. This is the extent of my dalliance with cocaine in Miami. I was a good student, stayed in school, drink milk, say no to drugs, the Nancy Reagan mold. But on or about the second season of Miami Vice, my cousin Holly and I were fishing at her house in North Miami. And we saw a kilo of tightly packed cocaine float up. And I immediately, reflexively said, "Quick, Holly! Go call the Channel 7 news truck if you see news in the making, 777 News." And she's like, whoa, She's older than me. She was taking care of me. She goes and calls 77 News, and as I'm holding this gaff and net up against the wall, I have all these visions dancing in my head. Like, wow, Nancy Reagan's going to come down and give me the key to the city, and Mrs. Virginia Boone, our high school principal, was going to throw me a parade and give me a citation. I might end up on a special episode of Miami Vice, or at the very worst, a special episode of Different Strokes. And it was, I felt like my arm was going to come off and everything, but the glory, like, wow, I can become big time, and I'm in elementary school, and I can become famous. And finally, after about 40 minutes, I look out of the corner of my eye, and I see the news van with the, swirly antenna, and these two guys get out with big cameras, and I was like, what's going on? He's like, the kid said he found cocaine. I was like, here, get it. He pulls me out. I feel like my life coming back too, my blood rushing back into my body, pulls it up. It's a mini pillow from a cruise ship. Yeah. But my intentions were great. I was going to save Miami from that incremental kilo. The Miami of cocaine's heyday and the narcotics explosion of Miami, of my early childhood in Miami, abounded with the surreal and the WTF. Let me give you an example. McDonald's, which is based outside of Chicago, is getting all these tip-offs from franchisees in South Florida. We're running out of the tiny spoon-tipped coffee stirrers. What's up? Like, kids in high school are hoarding them. People are coming in and taking out, cleaning out the inventory. It turns out they were perfect for portioning out cocaine and sniffing cocaine. People would wear them as necklaces. They became kind of a counterculture icon. Up-and-coming drug dealers would get them bronzed and gold-plated and would wear them for the longest time. And after that, they became paddles. If you'll notice, the little stirrers from McDonald's. The Florida Power and Light Company are utility. Let's talk about marijuana for a minute. There was also reefer madness in the late 70s and early 80s. So much pot was being seized. They actually called them square groupers, these bales that would wash up. You'd be at the beach, you'd be at the marina. They're always there, these massive bales of marijuana. So much marijuana was getting seized that our utility, Florida Power and Light, figured out how to run its turbines on marijuana. 730 pounds of marijuana replaced a barrel of oil in an oil crisis, if you guys remember 1980-81. The Federal Reserve Branch of Miami was so overrun with hot narcotics money, which one university estimated represented 30% of the economy, that by the turn of the decade, it posted a $5 billion cash surplus. That is more than all of the other Federal Reserve banks combined. Everybody was selling out of luxury cars, of condos, of anything. I mean, thoroughbred horses. There were coin-operated banks, they were called, on Brickell Avenue, that you would go in, and while banks were paying a lot of people at a time of inflation, 15%, you would pay them 15% to launder money for you. It was crazy, but it wasn't all sunshine and Crockett and Tubbs in a Ferrari, obviously. The flip side of this ledger is that Miami, by 1980-81, became the murder capital of the world. Its murder rate was the highest in the world. So this 100-year-old city, barely, this terminus of the Sun Belt, had effectively become a failed state. You had 125,000 Cuban refugees. Fidel Castro says, I am flushing my harbors of the scum, of the enemies of the revolution. They show up in Miami in the matter of 6 months. We had race riots that torched the city. Had you flown into Miami International Airport in 1980, you just see columns upon columns of smoke. Jimmy Carter didn't know, do I send in the National Guard? No, it is an election year. Florida is that swing state. How this percolated over the next year when that combusted with cocaine and the crazy riches of cocaine, if you consider you could get a kilo if you were an enterprising drug dealer in the Andes for somewhere on the order of $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. You bring it to Miami, you cut it with baby laxative or powdered milk, and you keep cutting it, and they say stepping on it, stepping on it, stepping on it. The street value ultimately could be upward of $500,000. Multiply that times thousands of kilos sluicing into the harbors of South Florida. And all these people who were dirt poor for years, turns out at least 10,000 of those people ejected from Cuba were criminals. Many of them were violent criminals that had their weapons of choice tattooed on the inside of their lips. All these people for hire, whether you want a speedboat person, a hitman, an odd jobs person. So you can quickly see how all of this came together, and the partying and the fun and the sex and everything combusted into this orgy of murder. Dade County breaks the murder record in 1980, and we ended up on Time magazine as Paradise Lost, November 1981, effectively calling Miami a failed state. The Chamber of Commerce, the Tourism Board, everybody had a serious problem on their hands. And one more WTF stat for you. The homicide rate was so overwhelming that the county morgue had to lease a refrigerated truck from the Burger King Corporation, which was right there in Miami. The medical examiner was beside himself. See my friend's documentary, Cocaine Cowboys. He says that at some point you stop counting the bullets in people. Our biggest mall in 1979 was shot up. There were shootouts on the freeway. People were showing up, cadavers in canals, bobbing everywhere. It had to stop somehow. Now, I'm not here actually to talk about my book. And what I'm about to share with you is it's a risk for me. It's a risk personally, professionally, maybe reputationally. In my culture, we don't tend to overshare despite what TEDx and LinkedIn and all these guys tell you to do. I go back to the question, why you, Roben? You were 4 when all of this happened. I came to this country 40 years ago from Iran. My aunt was in medical school. We feared for our lives. My father made the executive decision, flee before it gets even worse. 40 years ago, almost to the week. And that is me in 1980. And I had to travel this journey and publish this book and reopen 1980 and actually travel here today to tell you that I had to do this. It was almost my manifest destiny. Let me explain. Those first few years here, I just remember, in addition to the cacophony of everything that was going on in Miami, I'd stay up with my parents and watch Nightline. They let me stay up past 11 o'clock because it covered the hostage crisis. And part of us, I guess we were hoping that we could return to Iran, that this would blow over. It didn't. It sounds crazy to let a 4 or 5-year-old stay up past 11, 11:30, but we were all just huddling and trying to figure things out. My father was a doctor in Iran, and he was never able to get a high enough TOEFL score to have reciprocity on his medical degree here. So he was constantly hustling and going to Kaplan and trying to learn English and trying to be better. And all I remember for those first few years, my mom sobbing on the realization that we'd lost our country and everything and just had to pack it in a bag and come and, within a few days' notice. She had to go to beauty school. She was pregnant with my little brother then. And the important thing that I want to share with you today and to get off my chest and to own is that was a period of constant terror for me. That's me in my first preschool photo. And 1980, every morning was a nightmare for me. Dad would get me in his car. It was a Cutlass coupe. I remember the smell of the imitation vinyl to this day. I remember the Old Spice cologne that he would wear. And every morning was seemingly impending annihilation for me. I didn't speak the language. He would take me to preschool. We'd walk down this corridor, and 2 teachers would have to peel me off of his leg. every morning. And I didn't know if my dad was going to come back and get me. I didn't know how to tell these teachers that I needed to use the bathroom. All I could hang on to after they pried me off my dad was the smell of his gabardine pants and his cologne. And this terror that I had to carry as a 4-year-old. And in 20/20 hindsight, the air outside always smelled like smoke when we had free play and playground time, of which I was terrified and crouched to the side and didn't speak the language. Turns out the city was burning down. This is my shared trauma with the city of Miami. And let me tell you, I'm a very high-functioning refugee. Only after 35 years passed, and let me tell you about those 35 years, is I ran away from this. I mean, put it this way. I ran from Iran, and my family coming from Iran. How did I do it? By achieving, by making my parents proud, by always bringing that straight A report card, by being the most easy with language. I remember my dad at my 5th birthday got me to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, and he was so proud as an immigrant for me to have arrived, for me reading 141 books in the 1st grade and winning the reading competition, for me being the problem-solving guru and talented and gifted, for me getting into the college of my dreams, for me getting the fellowship of my dreams, for me writing cover after cover for Business Week, for doing things on the New York Times, for my dad to be able to brag to people that my son was on MSNBC or he was on CNN or listened to him on NPR. And I functioned on that until the very beginning of 2010 when my son arrived. My first child, 6 weeks early. Yeah, we were speeding down the interstate. My wife was scared. We were all scared. I had not planned for it. We'd just been to a real birth class that day. And he came out and he was crying, and they had to go and isolate him and give him some shots. And I just remember turning to him, and it was a true turning point. The axis of my earth had shifted, and I said, "Baby boy, I missed you. I missed you." I look back at that video all the time, and it was a new inception of my life. And I went and watched him in the isolation room as they gave him these shots, and my wife was being taken care of, and my heart broke for him that his mom wasn't able to hold him and bond with him at that point. And I get an email from my editor on the BlackBerry, "Your cover story is happening this week, man. It's full speed ahead." And I ran on those fumes for a few days and whatnot until maybe later that week, to relieve my wife in the morning because he was weak and he wasn't feeding and she was up all night with him, I held him, and his nails on the couch pierced my eyebrow. After that, when I handed him off to her, I went on the bus and hopped on the train to Grand Central, and I wanted that to sting. I wanted that to hurt because I was in crisis. I had completely figured out 1980. I'd completely run away from that. I created this construct, this persona, this person that you saw on the news. We're so proud of him. My mom's so proud of me. My kindergarten teacher would write me. Truth is, I was heartbroken, and my son's weakness put my own weakness of 1980 back in sharp relief. And all I wanted was for my dad to come up and hold me while I held my son. And I had no desire anymore to write cover stories. I had no desire to pitch TV producers. All I wanted to do was be with my son. And only, I think when my son was 3.5 years old, and I was in this crisis thinking, how am I going to become a creative again? How am I going to produce again? Did I finally, at my wife's behest, have the conversation with my father? I said, "Dad, do you know how horrific 1980 was for me? Do you know how much I fear for my son because of the condition I was in?" My dad, who's always provided for me, has been nothing but incredible and warm and generous, and we were provided for, and we prioritized accomplishment and love and whatnot. He said, "But do you know how hard it was for me? Do you know how I too was running? I was running away." You know, at one low point in the mid-'80s, my dad had to sell sneakers at a Kmart. He was a doctor in Iran. He resisted anti-Semitism. He did all these things to build himself up, and his empire collapsed. I had to build an empire too with my child. And I feared for him. And I learned at that inception that fear is no way to kind of motivate yourself in doing these. You can't fear what's going to happen if you don't have a cover story this calendar. You can't fear what's going to happen if MSNBC doesn't book you or if you're not on that booker's good side. It brought this realization that if I want to reconstitute from this, there's almost like a Maslowian hierarchy. I want to build something authentic. If this weight of the world with my father is now off my shoulders, how am I going to rebuild this authentically? And the first statement of that was my book. Hotel Scarface came out last year, and I tell you, in my old iteration, it would have been a very different investigative journalist. Like, I'd be more of a gotcha person, like, oh, you were a coke dealer? Well, I found out this stat, I found out this stat. I'm going to, milk them one directionally for this story because the deliverable was all that mattered. Instead, I steeped myself in 1980. The pivot was I could have the last say in 1980. I could be vulnerable with people. I could let these people be vulnerable with me. One of my sources shared a 6-page suicide letter with me. Thank God she didn't consummate the thought. But I wasn't going to go there and just gotcha steal the story from her. Another source was this master smuggler of the early 80s. He has this reputation in Miami. He's devastated that he had to go to his daughter's funeral in shackles and his other daughter's wedding in shackles. This wasn't all glitz and glamour. This was a lot of trauma. But you know what? I am grateful. I am grateful for the fact that even though it took 35 years, even though it took this circuitous route of me coming from Shiraz, Iran, Miami, New York, bang, 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 Western North Carolina to tell you this, it feels like it's finally an arrival, even though I literally arrived in this country 40 years ago. So I now emanate from this in a position where I'm no longer doing things out of fear. I have this voracious appetite to go and do projects on my own terms, to engage people, to actually look in the whites of their eyes and see what motivates them, to be the true ENFP that I am on the Myers-Briggs. And knowing that, and as I tell this to you, which would have terrified me just a few years ago to show up on a stage and tell these tens of thousands of people in front of us, it's extremely liberating to me. And I don't know if there's a neat TEDx takeaway on this, frankly, but if this resounds maybe with 2 of you, 10 of you, 1 of you, if somebody on the video, the TEDx video, goes up to the bargain bin clearance section of LinkedIn and looks for, scroll down for B-list thought leadership, I would say the closest thing to the takeaway to you is find your inception. Don't run away from it. So many of us are carrying traumas. So many of us are still devastated over a parent's divorce, clearly over abuse, over a misunderstanding, over a bully. And we construct, I think, these coping mechanisms to kind of make ourselves look better, especially in the world of Instagram and Facebook. I'm much more interested in the kind of the non-partially hydrogenated traumas and demons that we carry and helping other people, actually doing things like this to look people in the eye. I mean, that's my agenda. I'm not here to sell a book. I'm not here to sell a philosophy or a diet. I'm here to connect with you and to actually enlist you in helping me take an enormous burden off my shoulders. I am so psyched to take on the next chapter of my life because there's an informed authenticity to it. I don't have to sleep at night anymore, and the first thing I think of when I close my eyes is that morning terror and the smell of my dad's gabardine pants. Throughout all the accomplishment for 35 years, that's what I took to bed every night. That went away. So I leave you with a quote from Nada Surf, a lyric actually, which seems to sum up my situation. Maybe this weight was a gift. Thank you.